This story is about a 56-year-old American man who, while traveling alone in Iceland, unexpectedly becomes stranded in a remote village inhabited solely by women, leading to a series of heartwarming events. Before you read further, please consider supporting our storytelling efforts with a subscription or a like. It really helps us out. In the dead of winter, a biting cold wind swept through Chicago as 56-year-old American man Ethan Brooks boarded a flight to Iceland. Having spent most of his life in the tech industry, he had always dreamed of witnessing the northern lights and experiencing Iceland's raw beauty. This trip was a long-anticipated item on his bucket list, a romantic notion driving him from his bustling city life in Illinois to the far reaches of northern Europe. Iceland's popular tourist spots are mostly concentrated in easily accessible areas like Reykjavik and the Golden Circle, but Ethan wanted to avoid the crowds and venture into the sparsely populated inland regions to experience the true Icelandic landscape. He took a 3-week leave from his company and packed ample warm gear. From the plane, the snow-capped mountains and gray ocean were breathtaking. At an altitude of 10,000 meters, white clouds stretched endlessly as Iceland's coastline drew nearer. Ethan's heart quickened with excitement. It was his first time setting foot in a foreign land so different from his own, embarking on an unknown adventure that made him both apprehensive and thrilled. Ethan Brooks arrived in Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland, in early January. Stepping out of the airport, the cold northern wind instantly froze his cheeks, but this chill was also a fresh stimulus. He stayed in a hotel in downtown Reykjavik for a few days to acclimate, searching for information online and visiting the Tourist Information Center to get his bearings. Afterward, he rented a 4-wheel drive SUV from a car rental company. In Icelandic winters, blizzards are frequent, and a safe vehicle is essential. Road conditions are unpredictable, so please be extremely careful, the rental company employee warned. This warning gave Ethan a strange sense of confidence. I've driven snowmobiles in the Colorado Rockies, after all, he thought, not taking the warnings to heart. Iceland boasted magnificent snow-capped mountains, glaciers, and waterfalls. However, Ethan was constantly seeking out less-traveled areas, gathering information about them. While popular spots like the southern coastline and Jökulsárlón Glacier Lagoon were undoubtedly beautiful, he was more interested in the small trails marked in the remote northeastern part of the map. Weather permitting, he planned to follow these trails in search of the aurora and experience the true inland scenery. After a few days familiarizing himself with the Reykjavik area, Ethan took advantage of a slight improvement in the weather and packed his car with a cold-proof sleeping bag, emergency food, maps, and a GPS. He had been warned multiple times that there might be no supermarkets or convenience stores along the way, so he packed a full box of hot drinks, simple meals, granola bars, and beef jerky he brought from the States. Initially, he drove along the main central highway, enjoying the scenery. In the Nordic winter, the sun barely rose around 10 a.m. and began to set by 4 p.m., making daylight hours very short. During this time, one could only vaguely see peculiar landscapes and snow-covered houses. Driving alone on the empty roads, Ethan thought, if I stayed here for a few days, maybe I could forget all the world's troubles. To him, this place was an escape from the high-pressure life of the tech industry. However, as he gradually drove northeast, the population thinned out and gas stations became rare, forcing him to pay attention to refueling. On the afternoon of the third day, contrary to the weather forecast, a blizzard and strong winds suddenly hit. The blizzard whipped past his car windows, making road signs almost invisible. Iceland's winter really lives up to its reputation. It's terrifying, Ethan muttered, gripping the steering wheel tightly. With visibility under 30 feet, he easily got lost. The GPS either had a poor signal or, even if it knew the location, the vehicle couldn't climb steep slopes or would skid. He tried to seek help from occasional remote farmhouses, but they were either locked up tight or looked uninhabited for a long time. Eventually, the sun set quickly, darkness descended rapidly, and Ethan was trapped in his car, lost for over an hour. He turned off the engine and carefully observed his surroundings, a vast expanse of white snow. Panic began to set in. Am I going to be trapped here? Despair washed over him. Just then, he saw a faint glimmer of light in the distant darkness. It seemed like a broken street light or the window light from a farmhouse, very faint, but the moment Ethan saw it, his heart began to pound. Someone must live there. Feeling that his car couldn't go any further, he quickly got out and trudged through the blizzard. He stumbled for several hundred yards, his feet sinking into snowdrifts several times, but finally, a small village appeared on the other side of a hill. Small houses were clustered together, and one or two showed lights and the glow of a hearth. Ethan prayed inwardly, "Please let there be someone here." He knocked on the door of one house, and just as he was about to push it open, someone opened it, staring at him with wide eyes. He stepped into the house, where a blonde woman who looked to be in her 20s stared at him in surprise. She seemed to speak simple English and asked, "Are you lost?" "It's okay," Ethan, his voice trembling, replied. "My car is stuck in the blizzard. Can you help me?" She replied in surprise, "Wait a moment, let's get you warmed up first." She gestured for him to come inside. After a while, nearby neighbors came to inquire about the situation, but strangely, they were all women or men were to be seen. There were young women in their 20s, some in their 30s and 40s, and even one or two middle-aged women in their 50s. In this village, Ethan was the only man. What on earth is going on? Ethan was both curious and a little bewildered. Soon, someone translated for him. "Only we live here. It's mostly a village of women. Come in, it's too cold and dangerous outside." Confused, Ethan asked back, "Really? Only women live here." They smiled and nodded. He warmed himself up, took off his thick coat, and accepted a cup of hot tea and a towel. A woman who spoke fluent English, looking to be around 40, named Clara, began to tell the village's story. This village is called Eldis. It was originally a rural area in central Iceland, but due to poor economic conditions, young people flocked to the cities, leaving only some elderly people behind. But in recent years, Iceland's economic structure changed, many jobs disappeared, and the agricultural base weakened. So most men moved to coastal cities with thriving fishing industries or overseas. Conversely, some women stayed to protect their hometown or fled here due to family problems, eventually forming this female community. There are quite a few of us, even women in their 20s, 7 in their 30s, 7 in their 40s, and some over 50, totaling about 30 people living here. Ethan asked in surprise, "Didn't you think of moving to the city?" Clara replied, "We want to protect the natural environment here with our own strength and achieve self-sufficiency." Some left because of the stress of city life or conflicts with boyfriends or husbands. Unwittingly, this became a village without men. Ethan explained his situation. He had encountered a blizzard, his car was stuck, and his GPS signal was poor. If the snow doesn't melt or get cleared, it will be difficult to get the car out. "You might be temporarily stranded here," the women said, looking at each other somewhat troubled. "No one comes to clear snow here this season." However, they added that each household had some food and firewood stored, so Ethan staying for a few days wouldn't be a problem. Anyway, no vehicles can reach here recently. If you want to go back, you'll have to wait for the weather to improve. Ethan thanked the women who rescued him, bowing several times. Thank you so much. It's wonderful that you could take me in." The women smiled and said, "We haven't had a guest in a long time. It feels refreshing. Just make yourself at home here." So Ethan temporarily stayed in a communal living space in the center of Eldis village, a building converted from an abandoned school with many rooms, a spacious kitchen, and a living room. Several women took turns cooking and managing the stove. The next day, Ethan woke up and started looking around. After a night of heavy snow, the outside temperature had plummeted to over -10 degrees Celsius, about 14 degrees Fahrenheit. However, the women seemed accustomed to life here, coming out in the morning to clear the surrounding snow and carry firewood. The 7 women in their 20s, 7 in their 30s, 7 in their 40s, and the remaining middle-aged women helped and cooperated with each other, creating an atmosphere that left a deep impression. In the center of the village stood a small church, an abandoned school, and a few houses. At first glance, it looked like a miniature village. In summer, there would be pastures and idyllic scenery, but in winter, it was like a painting covered in white snow. The women usually did handicrafts, knitting, and food processing indoors, and some grew vegetables in a small greenhouse in the village. Ethan asked, "Can you have a greenhouse in such a remote place?" They proudly explained, "We built a simple geothermal and heating system ourselves to maintain it." Despite this, they seemed to face significant economic difficulties. Since there was no trade with the outside world, almost no money circulated here. Even if clothes are torn, it's hard to buy new ones, and there's no opportunity to sell agricultural products and processed foods, said Hannah, a woman in her 30s, looking somewhat regretful. Ethan thought, if this village could somehow connect with the outside world, maybe there would be a chance to sell their products. The village women asked Ethan, "What do you do? Why did you come to Iceland in winter?" Ethan answered truthfully, "I work as an engineer in a tech company. I wanted to relax as I'm nearing retirement age and have always wanted to visit Iceland. Originally, I planned to visit only the famous tourist spots, but then I wanted to see the more mysterious inland areas. Unfortunately, I ran into a blizzard." During their conversation, the women found him quite unique. "What a strange person to go on an inland winter expedition in such a cold place," they said, shaking their heads. Moreover, since there were no men in the village, Ethan's presence seemed to bring a sense of novelty. A few of the 7 women in their 20s shyly said, "We've seen plenty of American movies and TV shows, of course, but this is the first time we've had an American stay with us like this." Ethan found it amusing and laughed. "Well, I guess American culture gets around." Ethan naturally began to help with chores around the village, chopping wood, watering plants in the greenhouse, organizing the food pantry, and so on. In this way, their relationship gradually grew closer. The village women were both grateful and felt guilty, thinking it was too much to make him suffer in such a place. "We have absolutely no male labor now. Your arrival has been a great help to us." After a few days, Ethan realized that this village was by no means a paradise. Although the women lived together in solidarity, the food supply was very tight. While there were some vegetables grown in the greenhouse and stored food in each household, it was unlikely to last until the end of winter. Moreover, there weren't many livestock, and the meat supply was almost non-existent due to the lack of trade with the outside world. Daily necessities were also scarce. Astrid, a woman in her 30s and a leader in the village, frankly shared her concerns. Previously, the men in the village would go hunting or to the city to buy supplies, but not anymore. "It's getting harder for us to survive the winter on our own." Hearing this, Ethan suddenly had an idea. "Perhaps I can act as an intermediary, sell their goods outside, and bring back the supplies they need." He felt that since his return to the U.S. might be delayed, he could try to do something here. So what could they sell? He thought of handmade food, handicrafts, and hand-knitted items. The village women were very skilled in knitting, embroidery, and making traditional food. Clothes and gloves made from Iceland's unique wool might be popular with outsiders. Ethan gathered a few of the leading women and expressed his idea. "Could we turn the village's knitted goods or specialty foods into products? Perhaps we could connect by selling them to tourists in Iceland or through online sales." At first, the women were skeptical. "How is that possible? We don't have internet here, and cars can't get in." Ethan said, "My car is still stuck in the snow, but once the weather improves, we can transport the goods by other means. Also, we can use distribution agents or online sales agents in the capital. There must be a way." Furthermore, the designs of the socks and scarves hand-knitted by the women were exquisite and had an appealing touch of traditional Icelandic patterns. Ethan collected some, took a few photos, and said, "If we use these photos to write some promotional copy, it will surely attract tourists' attention." Hearing this, a woman in her 20s with artistic talent said, "Then let's design simple packaging." A woman in her 40s said, "I used to bake bread. Maybe we can make the village's specialty bread here." The village women seriously considered Ethan's suggestions and formed a kind of cooperative. They began to brainstorm product catalogs and packaging designs and took product photos with an old camera. Of course, without internet, online sales could only be an initial plan, but in this process, everyone invested great enthusiasm. Ethan also personally selected wool, kneaded grain, flour, and baked bread, realizing they indeed had the potential to create world-class products. The women of this village supported each other and had mastered various life skills, making them talented in many aspects. Iceland's winter nights were long and beautiful. One night, the sky was clear, and green-purple auroras began to dance over the entire village. Ethan suddenly heard someone outside shout, "Aurora," and ran out. Magnificent lights filled the sky, intertwined with starlight. The women in their 20s excitedly said, "That's the aurora. It's spectacular." Women over 40, more accustomed, said, "The aurora hasn't appeared for a long time." The mystical light quietly descended on the snow-covered land, touching everyone's heart. Ethan looked at the scene before him and thought, why not spread this magnificent view to the world? Why not let people come to this village? Although Iceland already had aurora tours, watching the aurora together in this unique women's village would be a special experience. If they could launch an aurora tour package, allowing tourists to stay here, taste the food and knitted products made by the women, and watch the aurora at night, it would surely have a market. This idea made Ethan's blood boil. This definitely has a market. Adventurous tourists would surely want to experience life in such a remote area. He immediately told this idea to several leaders in the village. Let's try tourism too. But this village was initially a women's community, which was key. Some women worried that if a large number of male tourists flocked in, it would disrupt the village's atmosphere. In fact, some had settled here because they had been hurt by men or were tired of a male-dominated society. Ethan fully understood this. I am a man, and I'm grateful that you've accepted me. If I bring other men into the village, it might burden you. Among the village women, some also believed that to survive, isolation from the outside world had its limits. Without Ethan, we might be in more difficulty with food and finances, they said, positive about opening up. Lena, a woman in her 30s, proposed, we can start by receiving female or couple tourists on a small scale. If too many men come at once, we might not be able to handle it. Meanwhile, the weather gradually improved and the blizzard weakened. Several village women and Ethan, equipped with sleds and shovels, went where the car was stuck. After a long time of digging and pulling, Ethan's SUV finally emerged from the snowdrift. Fortunately, the engine seemed undamaged and started smoothly. Now, if he wanted, he could leave the village and return to Reykjavik, but he already felt a strong desire to stay here. But someday, I need to go to the capital, promote our products and business ideas to the outside world, and then come back. The village women worriedly said, if you leave, what will happen to our business? Ethan reassured them, I will take the materials we prepared together to Reykjavik and look for investment or sales channels. I will come back, don't worry. In the following days, the village became very busy. Every household was making knitted clothes, gloves, scarves, socks, hats, and various other items. They embroidered Iceland's unique patterns on woolen products and attached eldest labels. Some bottled dried fruits and traditional drinks in small batches as samples for Ethan to take to the capital for display. Ethan documented this process with photos and attached a short description to each product, for example, eldest traditional sweater, embodying the women's love and the charm of inland Iceland. The women in their 20s fully utilized their graphic design skills and hand-drew trademarks. The women in their 30s, using their past experience living in cities, wrote simple English labels. The women in their 40s were responsible for sourcing materials and acting as consultants, while the elders over 50 passed on knitting techniques and recipes through their accumulated experience. With orderly collaboration, regardless of gender, many prototypes were completed in about a week. On an afternoon when some of the snow had been cleared, Ethan loaded the car with prototype samples, letters from the villagers, and other documents. The day of departure finally arrived. The village women reluctantly said, "Are you leaving?" Ethan had made a huge contribution to rebuilding the village, and everyone respected him deeply. His departure was met with reluctance. Ethan's mood was also complex. I'll be back soon. I'll take these products to Reykjavik to promote them, and if I find feasibility, I'll return immediately. I'll also bring back the items you need, connecting the village and the city this way. The village women said, "Don't lie. You must come back." Though they smiled, some had tears in their eyes. Astrid, Clara, and other main leaders also said, "We'll wait for you here." Ethan drove with difficulty, reaching the vicinity of Reykjavik a few days later. The car skidded in the snow on the way, and he almost spent a night in the car, but fortunately, no major accidents occurred. Upon arrival, he immediately dropped his luggage at a hotel in the city center and then promptly took the prototype photos and some items to promote them everywhere. He used social media, local Facebook groups, and his network of friends, telling the story under the theme knitted products and traditional food made by a women's community in inland Iceland. The response was better than expected. First time seeing a place selling such things. Local handicrafts are very valuable, people said. Sporadic orders and inquiries immediately poured in. Additionally, Ethan contacted friends back in the U.S. to understand simple overseas shipping routes. Even in small quantities, samples could be sent to the U.S. or other European countries. In just a few short days, Ethan's temporary inland rural cooperative began to show initial success. On the other hand, the tech company, Due to Ethan's extended leave, constantly urged him, "When are you coming back? We can't delay client matters any longer." Ethan had no choice but to call his boss and explain the recent situation, but his boss urged, "When are you coming back? It'll be trouble if it's over 2 weeks." After careful consideration, Ethan felt that although the company was a stable path, this project was too meaningful to him now. So he finally made up his mind. "Yes, a stable job is good, but what I really want to do now is help this village and create new value." He decided to resign. His friends worriedly said, "Are you crazy, quitting your job to run a cooperative in a village in inland Iceland?" But Ethan's mind was made up. "This is a new challenge in my life. I don't want to spend my whole life buried in an office. I want to do meaningful things with these people." Ethan started a small-scale venture in Reykjavik under the name of the Eldest Project. He handled various administrative procedures and signed contracts with online sales platforms to sell the village's products throughout Iceland and even to overseas tourists. He also rented a temporary office in the city, but living in the city long-term risked distancing him from the village. He needed to shuttle back and forth between the city and the village. Transportation was still difficult, but as long as the weather wasn't too bad, he could drive the SUV for a few hours. Thus, he devised a rotation plan: spend a week in the city developing the market, then a week in the village managing production and operations. The women of Eldest Village were overjoyed each time Ethan arrived and cheered for the supplies and news he brought. "Now we can use cooking oil. We got all sorts of seasonings." Small joys in daily life followed in turn. Their woolen products and processed foods were carefully packaged and then traveled to the capital in Ethan's car. As time went by, Eldest Village gradually gained fame. Coincidentally, Icelandic media reported the story of traditional handicrafts being made in a remote village inhabited only by women, and it began to spread by word of mouth on social media, becoming an alternative tourist destination. The problem was that this was changing the internal nature of the village. Some who had lived a leisurely life worried that if tourists flocked in, it would become noisy, many men would come, and the peace they cherished would be shattered. Some women in their 20s were in favor, saying, "What's wrong with that? This way, the village's finances will stabilize, and we'll have opportunities to interact with outsiders. We need to develop." When this conflict emerged, Ethan once again took on the role of mediator. "We are not unconditionally expanding tourism, but rather setting rules in the village and accepting tourists within limited scope, for example, only allowing a few people to stay per day. Male tourists must book in advance to enter the village, etc." His mediation proposal was accepted, and the village decided to accept tourism only on a certain scale. The women felt reassured, saying, "This way, we can protect our own lives while obtaining necessary income." Unconsciously, a year passed, and Iceland once again welcomed its long winter. Ethan continued to shuttle between Eldest and Reykjavik, expanding the business. The village cooperative had been registered as Eldest Company, with dozens of people living and working together. One day, the aurora once again spread magnificently over the village sky, more splendid than the previous year. This time, Ethan and the village women climbed a hill together, gazing at the lights dancing in the night sky. Some held hands and sang, while others rolled around and played in the snow. Seeing this, Ethan was filled with emotion. "Last year, I came here almost as a castaway, and now they have become my precious companions. Life is truly unpredictable." The young women in their 20s shouted, "You're such a good person. We're so thankful to have met you here." Though they treated Ethan as the village's sole male representative, he smiled and said, "I'm just helping out. You all are the amazing ones." As Eldest's success story gradually spread in the Nordic media, television stations and online media from Scandinavia came to interview them. Why was a remote village inhabited only by women able to revive, and what important role did an American man play in it? Ethan and the village women's representatives said in the interview, "The women of the village didn't simply leave the city to live in seclusion. They had the will to rebuild their community, and I was fortunate to help them achieve this goal. Now, we are gradually allowing exchange with the outside world, preserving tradition while creating modern livelihoods." The women unanimously praised Ethan. "We don't exclude men. It's just that the previous men all left. His arrival showed us a new way of living together with men," they said. That interview video circulated on platforms like YouTube, and more people learned about Eldest and wanted to visit. This was good news for the business, but some in the village worried that too many tourists would be troublesome. Ethan and the leaders decided to carefully adjust the acceptance capacity. Ethan, who had shared the village's joys and sorrows for nearly 2 years, also needed to make a change. He had registered a legal entity in Iceland under his own name, resigned from the tech company, and the village's business was on track. The village women were both happy and reluctant, saying, "It would be great if you stayed here forever." But Ethan explained, "Now, even if I don't live here, you've grown to the point where you can operate on your own. Besides, I have family back in the States and may have other projects to do, so it's time for me to sort things out for a while." The women also acknowledged this. "We will be self-reliant and develop well. You must come back to see us occasionally." The village held a farewell party for Ethan. Everyone gathered in the communal living space, preparing simple food, bread, and craft beer. On a snowy winter night, the glow of the stove was very warm, and the women presented songs and dances they had prepared, expressing their gratitude to Ethan. Astrid, in her 30s, stood up as a representative and said, "We always wanted to protect this village, but there were many difficult times in reality. You came here, brought us ideas for business and tourism, connected us with the outside world, and we were able to revive. Thank you so much." The women in their 20s praised. "We were surprised when a man first came, but we didn't expect you to be so excellent." The women in their 40s said with tears in their eyes, "Don't forget us in the future. You must come back to see us occasionally." Ethan also said gratefully, "I learned a lot here too. Whether women or men, when we collaborate, miracles happen. Thank you." As the event reached its climax, someone shouted, "Let's lift our Ethan." Women from their 20s to 40s surrounded Ethan and lifted him up like a crowd-surfing rock star. This wasn't an Icelandic tradition, but a kind of celebratory lift Ethan had described seeing at American sporting events or concerts, and everyone was very interested. In that instant, Ethan's body was lifted by warm hands and tossed up and down. Harmonious and joyful clamor, laughter, and emotional tears intertwined as Ethan swayed in the air. Tears streamed down his face. "Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much." The women shouted, "We should thank you. Without you, this village might have disappeared." Then they lifted him high again, crying together, laughing together. That moment condensed the warmth and humanity of the village. The next morning, Ethan packed his luggage into the car and hugged everyone goodbye. The women in their 20s said with a smile, "Be sure to contact us through social media or email. Next time, come see us if you're ever in our part of the world." The women in their 30s said, "We can do well even without you now, but if we encounter difficulties, we will contact you." The women in their 40s encouraged, "Be sure to take care of your health and continue to let us see you grow." Behind them, the elders over 50 tearfully saw him off. The moment he started the car, Ethan choked up, leaving the faces of the women he had spent 2 years with in Eldest Village. The clear winter sky and the bleak snowfields felt unreal, but to meet new challenges and connect with a wider world, he knew parting was necessary. So he pressed the accelerator. As the car drove away from the village, he could see the women waving to him from both sides of the road. Tears welled up, but Ethan waved back, mouthing, "Thank you." Driving across the snowfield, the Icelandic winter sun gradually rose. A few days later, Ethan sorted out his business documents in Reykjavik and booked a flight back to Chicago. After returning home, he planned to reunite with his family first, then expand the eldest project by traveling back and forth between Iceland and the US. Now that the village was accustomed to producing products independently and receiving small-scale tourists, Ethan only needed to provide additional support in between. A reporter interviewed him. "Why do you support a women's community in a remote area of Iceland so much? Is it for economic benefit?" He pondered for a moment and replied, "Of course, I can't say there's no economic benefit at all, but more importantly, I learned human warmth and solidarity from them. They protected themselves on an unnoticed snowfield and now gradually want to communicate with the world. I just want to be the bridge that connects them." Thus, the Icelandic inland adventure of 56-year-old American man Ethan Brooks, which began with a blizzard, ended with him becoming a leader of a cooperative. The women-only village of Eldest discovered new possibilities with his help, and Ethan rediscovered human warmth and collaboration here. On a spring day, Ethan, boarding the plane back to Chicago, gazed at the white clouds over the Arctic Ocean outside his window. Around his neck was a knitted scarf given to him by Eldest Village. "Someday, I will come back and do more meaningful things because I've made a promise to them." In his heart, The scene of dozens of women lifting him on the snow-covered field, their warm hands and emotional tears, was all vivid. It wasn't just a success story, but proof of the pure innocence of humans supporting and respecting each other. This small miracle was even powerful enough to melt the harsh cold of the Nordic winter. The women of Eldest Village are still knitting, baking bread, welcoming tourists, and living peaceful lives. Someday, a traveler visiting here again might say, "I thought only women lived here, but I heard an American man once came here and played a huge role. I heard the whole village cried when he left, leaving behind a legendary story." But this is not a legend. In reality, there are always people here creating lives together and sincerely welcoming each other. And it all began the moment a 56-year-old man, lost in a blizzard, accidentally discovered this village. Thank you for reading. If you enjoyed this story, please consider supporting us with a subscription or a like. It really helps us out.